everybody, and welcome back to my channel. And today I'm going to be talking about my thoughts on the BBC Two documentary called Silenced, the history of disabled Britain, which was on BBC Two back a couple of weeks ago. I watched this yesterday, and the documentary was hosted by the former CBeebies presenter Carrie Bonnell, who has a physical disability. And at the beginning of this documentary, she visits a hospital that used to be home to people with disabilities back in the day. And this home was people with disabilities who were seen as people who should have been fixed and treated or not born at all. To me, this is a sad thing to hear and watch this, because back then Britain saw people like me with disabilities as burdens, cripples, people who should have been fixed or not born at all. And it's just sad and beyond horrified. As a woman who identifies as being disabled, I feel that back then, if I was to have existed or to have been born, I would have been isolated away and for the rest of my life being treated by people who didn't understand me or know me that well. I feel this was absolutely disgusting, that people's rights were taken away and they were just shut in these isolation homes or hospital homes because there was nowhere else to put them, or their families simply couldn't cope. I feel this is really sad, because Britain again had a lack of understanding and a lack of confidence in how to treat people with disabilities and mental health issues, and the fact they assumed that we weren't capable of joining in with everyday life. To me, this is due to a lack of understanding towards disability. And it also seems to be about money back then. If you didn't have enough money, your loved one or you yourself were put into a medical institution because you were seen as too much of a burden. And the prejudice that still exists towards disabled people today, and the fear that was associated back then, and some of the language that is still used today, is absolutely abhorrent. Hearing the words such as cripple, weak-minded, feeble-minded, mind-blind. Like, what? Like, why would you do this? Like, why would you talk about disabled people in such a disgusting manner that then celebrities back in the day would do these disabled TV telethons? So when disabled people were to show up at the studios complaining that people's voices were being mocked and disabled were being mocked, I can understand why they turned up in their thousands to debate this and show the celebrities that we're not a money-making scheme. But people with disabilities are human beings just as much as they are. And I'm happy that in the years following on, since this prejudice and isolation and segregation of disabled people, we've become more of a country that is accepting and tolerant and inclusive of disabled people. There's a lot more successful communication with people with disabilities and non-disabilities now. We're a lot more aware of how to best support them and best help them to be included in society, to make sure their voices are heard, like myself. I have autism, and I learned to communicate with people by talking to them, listening to them, getting to know where the barrier is of communication. And I talk to politicians, I talk to neurotypical people about how to best support me. So now we're a more inclusive nation. I think a lot more disabled people are more confident at talking to people now. We're a lot more accepting and a lot more involving with people. And I think that's because we've learned to understand who they are as human beings. They're not just a label. They're not just this person, oh, but they're disabled. They're not worth talking to. Like, of course they are. They're human beings like any of the rest of us are. And we've moved forward by making sure that we don't just treat them as a medical label. They are a person behind. Each label is a person. And as an autistic adult myself, watching this documentary has really opened my eyes up to how the world sees disability still, and how it's still seen as the burden and the tragedy, and it needs to be fixed and cured and treated. And it doesn't. Like, having a disability doesn't mean that we're broken or damaged. It doesn't mean that we need to be put in an institution or put into mental care because we're unable to make decisions. We are individuals, and watching this documentary has made me so much more passionate about advocating for the rights of people with disabilities such as myself. And we can live independently. Seeing this documentary, seeing over time how these people who weren't in institutions in the video are now living independently, they're living their own life, they're able to talk about it, and they're survivors. They're people who were known as retarded and broken, and I know I don't like using that word, but for educational purposes, they were seen as mentally defective, mentally broken. There are people who are seen as tragic and a burden, and we're not. Disability doesn't have to be a bad thing. And like I said, over the years have gone by, we've learned to be more accepting and involving in disabilities. But we are a nation who has such a lot of disabled actors, actresses. We have a lot of Paralympians with physical disabilities and mental disabilities who do the Special Olympics. and we should be proud to accept them. They've worked their backsides off our country. Like, we should be proud of people with disabilities more than ever, because that makes them unique. Without us and without our unique gifts, you will not be able to function properly. And I feel that watching this documentary is opened my eyes up to how bad the stereotype and prejudice still is, and seeing how back in the day that these disabled children were seen as morally defective, morally broken, people who were incapable of making their own decisions, and they were medicated. That's disgusting. I cannot believe that the UK did this, and I'm going to talk about the actual law they used to keep people in these homes and in institutions, and it's called the Mental Deficiency Act. So, what is the Mental Deficiency Act, and when did it come into force? The Mental Deficiency Act was passed in 1913. It was an act of the United Kingdom of Parliament which made provisions for the institutionalisation and treatment of people deemed to be feeble-minded and morally defective. It proposed an institutional separation so that mental defectives would be taken out of the law altogether and out of law society's prisons and put into separate colonies. The bill was passed back in 1913 with only 3 MPs voting against it at the time. This act replaced the Idiots Act of 1886 and followed the recommendations of the Royal Commission on the Care and Control of the Feeble-Minded. It established a board of control for lunacy and mental deficiency to oversee the implementation of provisions and cares for the management of these 4 groups of people. So Group A were called idiots. They were considered to be unable to guard themselves against every common day dangers. Group B were mental imbeciles, incapable of managing their own daily affairs. Group C, the feeble-minded people. These people were considered mentally incapable of looking after themselves, requiring 24 hours a day, 7 days a week supervision. Group D were moral imbeciles. They displayed mental weakness or criminal psychological behaviours. This is absolutely abhorrent. Like, why? Why does the UK thought that this was okay to do? Like, to separate people with mental disabilities and physical disabilities into mental homes and to say that that was okay. No, that still shows that disability has prejudices. It still shows that the UK has to get better at disability awareness. I am shocked and horrified that back then, these poor children and poor adults who were also disabled and seen as crippled or broken, they were treated badly. They would take them away from their family just because they were disabled. Why take them away from their families when you could have used them for good? You could have used them to make more new laws. You could have used them to help make awareness of situations instead of separating them and isolating them. Oh my God, it makes me want to get so mad, but I'm so passionate about this kind of subject that I had to do a video on it. And like I said, I will attach some images now of the disabled people that we have as athletes, actresses and actresses to see how far forward we've come with this. But I hope you've enjoyed my little rant and my opinions. Let me know if you agree with me in the comment section down below. I will also attach the links down below in the video description. Please like, comment, share and subscribe, and I will be back with you next time. Bye!